Some people say that this is the worst lineup of UFC champions in history. That being said, we're going to go through every single UFC champion in the UFC right now and covering the biggest problem with them. And let's just get straight into it because I already recorded this video, but my mic was muted. So we're going to start with Jon Jones. This one's pretty obvious. Okay, he's ducking Tom Aspinall, and not only is he ducking Tom Aspinall, but he's holding up the division, and that's the biggest issue right now. Not him ducking Tom Aspinall. It's if he doesn't want to fight Tom Aspinall, it's fine. Just vacate the belt. That's the whole issue we're dealing with right now, is because you have a logjam in heavyweight that's honestly been going on since 2022, genuinely 2023. Whenever Francis Ngannou vacated the belt and Jon Jones stepped in, we've been getting title fights once a year. That's it. One heavyweight title fight a year. And the title fights, other than Jon Jones versus Ciryl Gane, the Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic fight, I honestly don't even count that as a title fight. Nobody wanted that fight. That wasn't a hype fight. Stipe Miocic didn't deserve that title shot. And nobody recognized that as a legitimate title shot or title fight. That was not the best heavyweight in the world versus the second best heavyweight in the world. That was maybe the best heavyweight in the world, which is Jon Jones, versus 42-year-old Stipe, who shouldn't be ranked, right? Because Stipe is nowhere near a top heavyweight contender. He's absolutely washed. He would lose to genuinely like the entire top 5, if not the top 10. And we have, for the first time in a while, an absolutely terrifying heavyweight contender that looks better than any heavyweight we've ever seen. Yet he's not getting an opportunity for the title shot because Jon Jones is scared to fight him, right? He's ducking Tom Aspinall. That's genuinely the only reason why this fight's not happening. Because in any other world, the champion, the undisputed champion, fights the interim champion. But in this world, with Jon Jones being champion, we have Tom Aspinall defending his interim title. That shouldn't even be a thing. What's the point of an interim title in the first place if you're not going to have the guy fight for the undisputed championship? It makes no sense. And we've been dealing with this for honestly 2 years, basically going on 2 years. And the heavyweight division, I think partially because of that, has been as bad as it's ever been. You have less than 30 fighters in the heavyweight division in the UFC right now, right? You have like a number 5, number 3 ranked Curtis Blades. He was almost going to fight a debuting heavyweight until the fight fell out. So that just goes to show how untalented the heavyweight division is right now. And it's being held up by Jon Jones because he doesn't want to fight Tom Aspinall. If he doesn't want to fight Tom Aspinall, just let go of the belt, man. We can make some other fights like Tom Aspinall versus Ciryl Gane or Tom Aspinall versus Pereira or something, right? We can figure it out. But right now we just have nothing. And that's even worse. Islam Makhachev's next. And the biggest problem with Islam Makhachev, really the only problem I can kind of find for Islam Makhachev, is that he's kind of ruining his career by not taking the right fights. And I don't know if this is 100% his fault or the UFC's fault, but all I know is that Islam Makhachev doesn't want to fight Ilia Topuria, or at least Islam Makhachev's team doesn't want him fighting Ilia Topuria. And if that's the case, then go up to 170. But Islam Makhachev's not going up to 170 because he doesn't want to fight Belal Muhammad, and Belal Muhammad doesn't want to fight Islam Makhachev. So basically the only 2 really good fights that he can take, he's not taking. And those are the best 2 fights. Arman Tsarukyan's like a close third. But let's be honest, a win over Ilia Topuria for Islam Makhachev would make him the face of the UFC. It would make him tons of money. It would make him a huge star. It would make his legacy great. A lot of people are saying that, beating a 45er does nothing. That's bullshit. We all know how good Ilia Topuria is. It would be like a Conor McGregor effect. This fight, Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev, would be like Conor McGregor versus Khabib Part 2. The 2025 edition. Ilia Topuria being Conor McGregor, the trash-talking guy from 145. Very similar in a lot of ways. I think a win for Islam Makhachev would kind of have the same effect that the win Khabib had over Conor McGregor did for him. I think it would blow him up into a huge star, yet he doesn't want to take the fight. And that's a winnable fight for Islam Makhachev. He's a pretty decent favorite in that fight. Like I said, completely winnable, but he doesn't want to take that fight. It's honestly might even be an easier fight than Arman Tsarukyan. I don't think so, but a lot of people think that Arman Tsarukyan's a harder fight. So if Islam Makhachev's not taking these fights, then who is he going to fight? Is he going to fight Arman Tsarukyan? I doubt that's going to happen because the UFC's pissed at him for pulling out last minute. Is he going to fight Oliveira for the second time? That would be a complete hype killer. Is he going to fight Gaethje? That would be a complete absolute abomination, but also it would be a complete hype killer. That fight does if you're talking about fights that do nothing for Islam Makhachev, Justin Gaethje's that fight. not Ilia Topuria. Ilia Topuria would be amazing for Islam Makhachev, yet he doesn't want to take the fight. So that's the biggest issue with Islam, is just, you know, he has great fights, but he's just not taking them, or the UFC's not making them, either or. Ankalaev's next, and the biggest thing with Ankalaev that I can find is that he's just not that entertaining. Like, let's be real. He's not as entertaining, especially in a division where you have guys like Yuri Prochazka, where you have guys like Alex Pereira, where you have guys like Khalil Roundtree and Jamal Hill. Like, say what you want about their skill, but those guys are way more entertaining. And Ankalaev, people say, yeah, he has finishes. Like, who are his finishes against? It's against the most chinny fighter of all time, practically, other than maybe Cody Garbrandt, Johnny Walker. A knockout against Johnny Walker doesn't mean shit about your finishing ability. And then he has finishes against lower ranked light heavyweights. But this guy's not a Yuri Prochazka. This guy's not an Alex Pereira in terms of finishing ability. The funny thing is like, he has the opportunity to get finishes. We've seen him hurt Pereira. We've seen him outstrike Pereira. He was winning on the feet, and he decides to clinch with Pereira for basically an entire round. I think he tries to play it safe. I think he's got that point fighter type game plan and type style. He's like a Leon Edwards, where, you know, he's up on the scorecards and he just tries to play it safe. He doesn't try to go for that finish. He's more focused on not losing than he is winning, if that makes any sense. And that's the biggest issue with Ankalaev that I can find. You know, it's just, he's not as entertaining, especially in comparison to all of his opponents. So he's basically like the worst option to be champion, because he is the best light heavyweight right now. But it just sucks that the guy's not entertaining. That's the biggest issue with him. Ilia Topuria is next. We're technically counting Ilia Topuria as featherweight champion. Technically, he does not vacate the belt until Diego Lopez versus Volkanovski starts. So we're counting him as featherweight champion right now. And the biggest issue with him is that he left featherweight, right? That's the biggest issue. He's caused a lot of problems for the featherweight division, right? He kind of left featherweight in shambles. I don't think it's a huge deal. I don't think featherweight's just done for. You still have the same featherweights that were there when Ilia Topuria was champion. The only difference is it's not as hype. The title fights are not as hype, because we know Ilia Topuria was the best featherweight, and now he's not in there anymore. He left and he's up at 55, right? And Volkanovski versus Diego Lopez is just not that hype, because we know Volkanovski just got starched by Ilia Topuria. So it's like, is that fight hype? Yeah, just because it's a sick matchup. But in terms of like meritocracy and who's the best, those guys aren't the best in the world. Ilia Topuria is the best featherweight in the world, and now he's up at 55. Another thing is like, what happens if Ilia Topuria gets knocked out at 155, or he just loses at 155? It was kind of all for nothing, right? Ilia Topuria caused an insane amount of issues and basically forced the UFC to put him in a title picture at 155 instead of trying to just wait and defend his title and get a super fight later in his career. He's basically forced the UFC to make, you know, these difficult matchups, because let's be real, no one at 55 wants to fight Ilia Topuria. And Ilia Topuria only wants a title shot. So it's like next to impossible to even book these fights. And if he loses, this was literally all for nothing, right? And now he's basically killed all of his hype. He was once, you know, this featherweight who beat the best two featherweights of all time back to back. He had this undefeated aura. He's never lost. And now he gets his ass kicked by a 55er, and most of his hype is completely gone. And what happens next? Maybe he returns to 45. It's a big gamble that he's taking, and it might not pay off, and it might cause way more issues than problems it solves. So that's the biggest issue with Ilia Topuria. Belal Muhammad's next. This is the easiest one. He's just boring as fuck. He doesn't get any finishes. The only thing you can say, oh, he got a finish against Sean Brady, which actually aged pretty well now that I think about it, but he didn't really finish Sean Brady. Let's be real. He just tired out Sean Brady and made him quit. That's not the same thing as starching somebody, flatlining somebody, or submitting somebody and choking them out. It's not the same. And Belal just doesn't do that, right? He's a great grappler. He's got great cardio, but he doesn't get finishes on the ground, rarely. And he doesn't have any knockout power. He doesn't flatline people. And that's just what makes him boring. You just know that this guy's not going to get a finish. And that's the problem with like the JDM fight, is it's not that hype, because you know this fight's just going to decision. Belal's probably going to win. It's going to be a close fight. Not much is probably going to happen. And that's basically every single Belal Muhammad matchup for the most part. You know, maybe Joaquin Buckley, that's more of a hype fight, because, you know, Buckley could probably put him out cold. But other than that, basically every Belal Muhammad matchup is just not as good as any other welterweight matchup. DDP's next. I think Dricus was honestly the hardest person to find a problem with. The only thing I'm going to say about Dricus is that his style is goofy and it just makes the sport kind of look bad. Like if you think about it, you look at Ilia Topuria, who looks like a professional boxer, and then you look at Dricus Du Plessis, he looks like a fighter straight out of 2005. Like he looks like a barroom brawler, you know, and he's champion. Like that's the best guy in the world at 185, a guy that looks like a drunken brawler. I'm not taking anything away from him. Like he's entertaining. People love that style. Most UFC fans like Dricus' style. It's entertaining, but it does kind of make the sport look like 20 years older than it actually is when you watch Dricus Du Plessis fight for the title. That's the only thing I really say about him. Like I can't think of anything actually bad about Dricus right now. He's an entertaining fighter. He's fighting legit contenders, but Merab Dvalishvili's next. And the biggest issue with Merab is that he's basically cleared his entire division and there's no really compelling matchup at 135. Like you have the next fight that's getting booked, which is O'Malley versus Merab 2. People hate that fight, right? That's not that good of a fight. The first fight wasn't entertaining and they're doing a part 2, right? But there's not really any like much better option than the O'Malley fight, if we're being honest. Like there's really not. Who's going to fight for the title other than O'Malley? Petr Yan, that's like the clear one to fight for the title just because he's coming off of a win. He got 50-45 in their first fight, right? That's a rematch and he got completely dominated. That fight's not that hype. Like we kind of know what's going to happen. The Umar fight, you can kind of do a rematch, but he's just lost and he gave it his all and he just could not beat Merab. He got too tired. He got gassed out. And that's a big issue that he's going to need to fix if he wants to beat Merab Dvalishvili. So there's not any clear matchup. There's no big scary contender. Umar was that big scary contender and he couldn't beat Merab. So now it's kind of, you know, the vision's getting stale right now. There's no compelling matchup. And I think it's mostly because Merab beat basically every single, you know, good contender on his way up to the title. Which brings me to the next one, and that's Pantoja, the last guy on this list. Pantoja's basically done the same thing. He's cleared out his entire division. But the thing about Pantoja that's a little bit different than Merab is he's kind of boring. Like, I know people don't like Merab's style, but Pantoja, like, the guy's really hit or miss. Sometimes he has a good fight, but sometimes some of his fights are just absolutely fucking stinker, boring ass fights. Like he finished Kaya Sakura in like the second round. But that's a guy who was debuting in the UFC who wasn't really ready for a title shot. So when he faces actual top contenders like Brandon Royval, I went to that fight in person. I was genuinely like almost falling asleep, you know? So he was laying on Brandon Royval the entire time. I know he's had better fights, but you know, that's a big reason why flyweight people don't really pay attention to. Is just there's not many finishes. There's fights that end up like that. And there's no fresh matchup. There's no like clear contender for Pantoja right now. That's the biggest issue, is he's not that entertaining. A lot of people, you know, try to hype him up. They're faking it. This guy's not that entertaining. And he's beaten basically everybody. There's no hype matchup. Those are my biggest criticisms for each UFC champion right now in the UFC. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'll see you guys in the next one.